Path of Fire was lit, bro. Let me tell you about it. So, I just finished Path of Fire. Oh my god, what an experience. What a story. What a game. So much better than Heart of Thorns. Ooh, I don't even know where to begin. First of all, I changed into a Mirage, so that kind of made my life a lot easier because most of it was auto attacks. But you know what? That's not even important. I probably would have had just as much fun on the Virtuoso because I love the Virtuoso just as much. Anyways, let's get down to the real stuff in the game. First of all, what a change from Heart of Thorns. I finally felt like I'm doing damage. Normal mobs were just fucking dying. Finally. It was so much fun. Engaging a lot of enemies again was great. A lot of the missions required to fight a lot of enemies, and you're not in as much danger as you were in Heart of Thorns. Fantastic change. Holy shit. I cannot even express how happy I was doing PvE content, actually combating enemies. It was so much more fun than in Heart of Thorns. Holy hell. This of course also made the elite fights and the boss fights matter a lot more because now you could increase their health proportionally. The fights, this is probably the biggest problem I had with Heart of Thorns. Bosses lasted forever, and even though some bosses in Path of Fire do last quite long, nowhere near. The fights are way more engaging. It was so much more fun. I had so much more fun fighting bosses. They were more challenging in a way. Mechanically wise, they were more challenging, but they weren't as punishing, so you could afford to make a mistake or two. Heart of Thorns was like, oh my god, bro, I made a mistake, I'm fucked. Now, that being said, in my opinion, story difficulty overall should cater to people who are new to MMOs to an extent. Obviously, don't make it way too easy, but also don't make it that hard. A lot of the monsters, a lot of the boss fights have mechanics that you have to dodge constantly. Especially like I did a bit of Living World Chapter 4, and the first main enemy there, holy fuck, the last 10% of HP is just crazy. I loved it, but I can see it being very, very hard for people who are new to the genre, new to gaming as a whole. The fights can be extremely demanding of the player, and I feel like yes, it is fun for us experienced players, but man, that could be really challenging for people who are just not as useful. However, that being said, like I said, they are forgiving, so even if you die multiple times, a lot of the fights kind of like let you die, and it's fine, it's not a big deal. And another thing, look, I am overall decently geared. Most of my items are Berserker, I have good crit, I have a lot of damage, supposedly. I feel like the story should cater to people who just have like random yellow gear and they should still be doing fine. Okay? Like I am very well geared overall. I took my time in gearing myself. I wasted a lot of my gold to get the Berserker items that I wanted, to get the stats that I wanted. I researched stuff on the builds to make myself do more damage, to make my life more easier. I don't expect new players to go through that. So in my opinion, it's still technically a much harder game than it should be, at least for the story. I don't mind if all of the PvP of the game, like the dungeons, if we have any fractals, raids and all that stuff, if that's harder. But the story, which is really what most players would do when they get into a game, I feel like that should be taken down a notch and make it a lot more accessible. Currently, Guild Wars 2 overall, no matter which expansion or like the base game or the Living Worlds, overall I would say it is the hardest, by far, not even close, the hardest MMORPG I've ever played, just in terms of main quests. Forget everything else, just the main quest is so freaking hard. Was okay for me. Okay, wasn't that big of a deal. I was okay with it. Like you can view my gameplay. I wasn't struggling overall, but I can see someone. Like I'm experienced. I've played MMORPGs for like 15 plus years. I've played Elden Ring, Souls games. I've played shooters. I've played strategy games. My brain is geared for gaming at this point. And so for me, it wasn't that bad. But somebody who just wants to get into it, like who never played anything before, I feel like some tuning needs to be done for sure. Now let's talk about the story, okay? So for the story, in my opinion, was very, very well paced. You start with dealing with minor issues in the city, in like surrounding areas, investigating, stuff like that, and then you get to a point where shit is hitting the fan. Boom, you end up fighting the big bad. Now, overall, before we get into the nitty-gritty, like the small details, I would say the overall story of Path of Fire gave you if I could put this into a movie, this reminded me kinda, and you're gonna laugh at me a bit. This reminded me Batman with Christian Bale and the guy who plays Venom. Forgot his name, but where Batman is versus Bane. Okay, I think it's the third Batman movie with Christian Bale, and has the whole hero's journey. He meets the villain the first time, he loses. He meets him the second time, he basically dies, like he gets thrown into like the abyss, right? And then on the third time, he fights and he beats him. Now, what really changed between those three fights wasn't that the character got stronger, because it's still Batman. It's not like he developed something in that cave. I mean, yeah, he climbed out, sure. But let's be real, he just healed and then he climbed out. It wasn't like he gained some superpower. It felt like the difficulty of the boss did not increase. Your power did not increase. The circumstances changed, right? And we are going to go into spoilers. So for example, the first time you fight Balthazar, he doesn't give a shit about you. He straight up just like within less than a minute just straight out kills you. Nothing can do about it, just kills you. Well, about to, but then Vlast comes, sacrifices himself for you, so you live, and he even leaves you alone. He's like, yeah, this guy means nothing, he's so weak, I can kill him like squat him like a fly, and he leaves. You're not a threat to him. Well, I mean, he also got blown away by Vlast dying, but whatever, doesn't matter. And then the second time you meet him, he actually toys with you. He even heals you. He literally kills you and heals you so you can keep fighting, because he's a smart villain. He doesn't care about you. He's not testing you. He doesn't give a shit about you. And he ends up killing you. But he's using you to bait out Aurene. Aurene, yeah. And when she shows up, the second she shows up, he basically kills you. Instantly. It's like it wasn't even like a battle. You did like, oh, you brought him to 10% HP. Motherfucker heals to full like that. Like nothing. Fucking great. It really shows how powerful this guy is. And then the third time you meet him, obviously circumstances change. You have an army fighting his army, so you're not getting like exhausted or tired from fighting his enemy, like his army to get to him, stuff like that. Now on the third fight, his circumstances change. One, he is weakening a big fucking dragon, so he's exhausted basically. I wouldn't say exhausted, but like he did expend a lot of energy for that. You are fighting with Aurene to deal damage to him finally, and you have the legendary sword from Ritlock. Okay, so all your circumstances change. It's not like you got stronger, but it made sense that you could beat him now, and that was fantastic. And when you do, you caused a massive shitstorm, for the next Living World and probably the next expansion. So all in all, from beginning to end, gave you a whole story, like a hero's journey, and then it even makes it so that the continuation would make sense, right? What else I really loved about the story is it used assets from the previous storylines, from the previous Living Worlds. Okay, the whole training you did with Aurene now came into effect. You actually got to use it fighting Balthazar, right? Even though you can see on the video, it took me a while to realize what I needed to do, but that came into effect. There are other small aspects, right, that like they brought from the previous Living Worlds and Heart of Thorns that played in Path of Fire. Now I understand. This might sound like, well, obviously that's how stories work. You make some assets in the past, then you bring them to the present. It's like, yes, but you have to understand, for 15 years of my life, I played a game that threw away its old story with every expansion. So for me, this is a big positive. Okay? Now, us going into the other world, us understanding what's going on with the gods. There's a lot of like lore bits, and I have missed a lot of it. I didn't really understand why the gods left. Cormier's like didn't really give us much of an answer. Just said that's like, listen, we can't have gods fighting gods because, you know, look at what happened when Guild Wars 1 with Abaddon. I get that. I understand. But, you know, kind of like a shitty excuse if you ask me. But it's fine. That wasn't like that big of a deal. Okay? So the gods left. You go to the underworld. The god who's supervising the underworld is also absent. So you get to go back because, you know, you've managed to get your soul back or something. And then you can teleport back. This whole expansion as well keeps talking about this Joko fellow. Now, you never deal with Joko. You deal with his subordinates and all that stuff a lot. But you never actually deal with Joko. When you do deal with Joko is right after you deal with Balthazar. So, and it also like it's not even a surprise. Joko says Balthazar imprisoned me here in this place, whatever. And then it's like, well, you defeat Balthazar, therefore whatever magic he casts got dispelled, and therefore Joko is now free to leave. So now you're dealing with Joko in Living World, which, by the way, I am excited to play Living World 4 to see where this goes, because shit is about to hit the fan. And the only thing that the story missed, in my opinion, this is the only real thing that the story missed, that we needed more of. We needed some Casimir hiccups, and we needed some more rocks. But it's understandable. Casimir matured a bit. She's not as nervous. She knows the stakes. She knows she's fighting a god. Shit happens. Rox, understandably, she is very busy. She has to babysit a fucking man-child who, as soon as he shows up, gives us fucking shit. It's like, boom! Slap! Right away, this fucking guy, man! What a piece of shit. Now, this is a Living World 4 part, so I'm not gonna go into it, but man, Bram, please let there be a boss fight against Bram so I can fucking kill him. Just saying. I'm just saying. The questing is with every MMORPG. You come to a new place, you have to do some chores because people here don't know you. Yeah, you might be the commander, everyone knows you as such, but I would say at least you didn't get to pick up some dung. Like in some MMOs, you go to a different world and apparently you're a fucking dung collector. Okay, go figure. But here, at least the quest did make sense. Help an outpost, investigate or invade a base, all that stuff. All the main story quests, in my opinion, made a lot of sense, but again, that kind of relates to the story. So that's not exactly what I want to talk about. What I do want to talk about is the masteries and the mounts. Now, those ones, I'm not gonna lie, I had PTSD from Heart of Thorns, and it is cured by Path of Fire. Aside from the first thing that I needed to do, which was level my reptile to be able to jump long distances, I haven't paid attention to mounts at all. It was almost natural the way the mounts leveled. It was such a welcome change compared to Heart of Thorns. The mounts, all of my mounts right now, the ones that I have, I didn't get the Jackal yet, I didn't get the Flying Mount, obviously, I didn't get the Turtle because that's End of Dragons. Okay, the mounts I got is the Skimmer, the floaty one, the Rabbit, and the Reptile. All four of them, all three of them, if I'm not mistaken, are maxed out except for the last fifth one, which shares one of their abilities with the other mounts, which I really don't care about. I'm using them for mobility, not for their attack or whatever, so I don't really care. Okay, so extremely easy. The mastery points, extremely accessible, I would say. You do have to go out of your way, yeah, obviously, all that stuff. But for the most part, I would say non-issue. The masteries in Path of Fire were completely non-issue. Heart of Thorns, bad. Path of Fire, good. Okay, so kudos to the developers that finally the masteries were just such a welcome change, and man, did I enjoy getting those upgrades to the mounts. It just increased the enjoyment of the mount so much more. The reptile jump, I think it's like 3 times the distance than it was. I thought it was maybe like 2 times. It feels like it's 3 times. The rabbit, there was one thing I can say about the rabbit. That guy fucking sucks if you have to like kind of like rotate him on the spot and aim him somewhere. You would think it would be easier. It's like he only has 2 legs. Like, just fucking tilt. No, cannot do it. Anyways, pain in the ass with the rabbit, but you get used to him. The jump, very, very welcome. Helps me traverse insane amount of terrain. I even went the wrong way one time. This was like already in Living World, but I went the wrong way. So you're supposed to go from the north side, go through the water and find the cave. I went from the south side, which is like some base that apparently there's a siege on it. And I just jumped over all the mountains with the rabbit, just found like, you know, a bit of geometry, a bit of like calculations and stuff like that. Find the right angle to jump and boom. And it increases the game so much. Having these like small calculations you need to do in how you travel and stuff. Obviously the flying mount is going to take all of that and like remove that out of the water. Though I heard the flying mount is also very, very interesting because like you have to keep momentum, unlike in WoW where it's like it's easy peasy. In Guild Wars 2 it actually requires you to be good at it, but we'll see, we'll get there. Either way, these type of things that like help you traverse the terrain of the game, fantastic. The quest to get them, not a big deal. It's like you complete 1 heart, which was extremely easy, extremely fast, and right away you get your mount. The currency that you need to pay for the mount is extremely available. I had like way more than I needed. Absolutely no resistance with continuing the story quests because of masteries, unlike what happened with the Heart of Thorns, where you do you do the quests and then you get stuck because you have to do these masteries, and these masteries take forever. And then you get the mastery and you continue the story for like 2 or 3 chapters, and then boom, you have to do another mastery, and just kept taking you out of the story. This time, these mounts kind of felt like they're a part of the story because you really need them right away. So for example, the skimmer mount, right? The reason you need the skimmer is because the place you were going is filled with, what do you call it? The sand that like you sink through, sinking sand. I don't know what it's called. Anyways, and the only real way, or like the most comfortable way to get there, is to have a skimmer mount because it glides over the sand. That's not an issue for him. So it makes sense to need the skimmer mount. Okay, right away it makes sense. Like you want to continue that way, you're gonna need a skimmer mount. We can't give you a skimmer mount because there's a problem happening in the base with the skimmers. So you solve that problem, you get a skimmer mount, boom, you continue. So it made a lot more sense. Similar with the rabbit, right? It's like you need to get to like certain high points in order to talk to Timey, in order to get the last, what do you call them? Projected notes, whatever. So all of these things, and it's like in order to get them, you need to jump to high places. The only way to do it, you need the rabbit. Boom, right? So the masters this time, the questing for them made sense. The game was not. It didn't feel like the game is actively going against you. It was a smooth sailing. Basically, right after I got the distant jump for the reptile, but I feel like that was my fault because my reptile already got the first mastery filled up, and the second one is the high jump, I believe. So I forgot to level it up. Okay, so that was my fault. So I did a bunch of quests where my bar was already full, but I forgot to level it up so I can start training the distant jump. If I did that, I would probably have the distant jump instantly when I needed it to traverse the canyon and get to the rabbit mount and continue the questing. So in that regard, kudos on the quest pacing. Everything was a lot smoother. I really, really enjoyed Path of Fire questing. Now, one of the complaints I really had, and this is specifically Heart of Thorns, but this is all overall Guild Wars 2 as a whole. The game was too demanding mentally. It's like you have to focus on like the combat itself. Just shit had too much HP, deals so much HP. A lot of shit had mechanics that you had to dodge. Even if like it's not visible mechanics, like a sniper that shoots you a few rounds fast, you have to dodge it, otherwise you lose like most of your HP. Mobs going invisible, you have to LOS, line of sight, you have to dodge properly. You have a lot of buttons to click for your rotation, all that stuff. That was a big problem of mine, and it's like I said, I could not play the game for very long durations. Most games I can play like 20 hours. If it's a new game and I'm into it, I can play like 20 hours like that. Like the time just fucking flies. I think Elden Ring, first time I played it, I think it was like 28 hours in a row. I didn't even sleep. Fuck it, this game is good. I don't want to sleep. Okay? So, stuff like that was really, really annoying to me as I was doing the questing. It just made me so tired and I just couldn't focus. I switched to Mirage during Path of Fire. Now there are other builds, like for example Virtuoso, that also make this a bit easier, but Mirage is literally like 1 to 2 button rotation for almost all my needs. Okay, extremely low maintenance, extremely easy to play, and I'm so happy I made this change. This is a bit of a review on the Mirage. Obviously this is not as a specialization as a whole. I don't know how it plays in other fields. I don't feel like I would enjoy it too much in PvP because of lack of avoidance, let's call it that way. Okay, lack of range in a sense. But as far as just like doing the story, I could play it with my eyes closed. That's how easy the Mirage was, and it made my experience so much better. Not because like, oh, now I can be brainless. No, I still had like boss fights, I still had to pay attention. I still had to pay attention to a lot of things. When I was doing events, I had to pay attention, sure. But most of the combat, especially throughout the story, pretty much auto attack. I had like my one ability on the great sword on auto. I never had to click it. And it's like my mirages, basically my illusions, did almost all the work, right? It just felt so much more relaxing to play the game, and it allowed me to play for longer and have my mental faculties, and I wasn't as tired to read stuff in the story, to listen to the cinematic and pay as much attention to my surroundings. It was just such a breath of fresh air and so much more relaxing to play Guild Wars 2. I am so happy I chose Mirage, and I feel like I cannot stress this enough. It is very important if you are playing Guild Wars 2, if you're a new player, and the class you are playing is a hard class, not because it's hard to play it, but because it demands you to actually use a lot of your skills, even if it feels natural, it will tire you out. It is so tiring to play classes that are not the simple ones. For example, I believe if I played my Guardian, I would probably have an easier time than with my Virtuoso. However, I would probably not have as much fun because I found Virtuoso fun, even though it was so demanding. Mirage was a nice middle ground for me. It wasn't too complicated. It wasn't complicated at all, to be honest. But it still had that little, like, if I really want to, I can just, like, burst motherfuckers down. If I really wanted to, right? It's like I can put a bit more effort and I'm gonna have a lot more fun. And if I want to relax, I could relax. I couldn't really do that with a Virtuoso. I know there are builds that kind of allow it, but, you know, didn't feel as much. And even like the relaxing build of Virtuoso, I watched the video and it's like, it still requires a lot more work than the Mirage. So, in my opinion, choosing the right class. It has to be fun. It has to be like the level, like the skill cap one should be decently high, but the middle ground should be pretty good in terms of like clearing content and not being too difficult to use. Okay, for me that middle ground was Mirage. For some it might be the Warrior, for some it might be the Hunter. I heard the Hunter is like super easy, and the Warlock, I believe, is also super easy. Okay, but very important tip I can give new players: explore the classes and specializations to make sure that your life is easy while you're playing the game, because this game is hard. Try to make your life a lot easier for yourself. This is it for the review. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for spending your time here. Thank you very much for watching up to this point. And if you did enjoy it, do the YouTube thing, leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Help me out here. You know, I really enjoy doing this content, and hopefully I will be able to do this more and more often and won't have to go to work as often. If you know what I'm saying, you know. Anyways, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.